Not a matter of if, but when crisis will rock your world. I'm Roshini Rajkumar, crisis strategist, licensed attorney, and host of The Crisis Files. In each case file, we explore hot topics with insiders who share game-changing insights. You met Erin Kiernan in case file number 102, Understanding Autism. She's a mother of 3. One of her children is on the autism spectrum, which led Erin and her husband on their own journey of busting myths and improving narratives. In light of headlines about the cause of autism, Erin is back for the case file I call Lateral Violence. Erin, in September 2025, President Donald Trump had a press conference citing Tylenol and a linkage to autism. That in itself set off a crisis of science. But there are tangential issues happening in the autism community itself, including finger-pointing of another kind. And I thought there is no better person than you, Erin, to get into this.
Well, thank you. I'm flattered that you think that, although I really wish we were talking about some different aspects of autism awareness and understanding autism and advocating for autistic people. But what we really are seeing now is a culture of fear and a culture of a term that is new to me that I recently saw on social media called lateral violence. And I'll give credit where credit is due. It's an account that I have only recently started following on social media, and her handle is Autism Out Loud. She is also an autism mom like me. And her headline caught my attention, lateral violence in the autism community, because I thought, what does she mean? What is that? And so essentially we're talking about usually a marginalized community, a vulnerable community sort of turning in on itself. And so anger and frustration and advocacy that should be going out into the world at large and into our respective communities is instead all aimed inward. And so you sort of have these factions developing within the autism community, and people are attacking each other, which is really sad and unproductive. And I think many of us hate to see it happening.
Yeah, and when you talk about this group of, anyone who's neurodiverse and their families, parents like you, siblings, and any one of us in the non-autistic community or land that care and want the beauty of the neurodiverse to be brought out, whether it's their science, their artistic skills, all of these things. So when you brought this to my attention, I just thought we have to get into this. And it really comes kind of at a time when the world, especially in the United States, but even all over the globe, are talking about autism more and more. And some are saying it's because there's more of it, there's a higher prevalence and a higher rate of autism. And many say, well, there were probably always a higher percentage. It was just not as diagnosed.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's something that I enjoy talking about because I have learned so much in recent years. And initially, when our son was diagnosed, I think at that point in time, the rate was maybe 1 in 42 or something like that. And of course, now we know it's up to 1 in 31. Some people are saying it's even higher than that now. And I have really tried to just become a sponge for information about autism. And there's a lot of it out there right now. And more than ever, it is difficult sometimes to discern what's credible information. And so I have really tried to lean hard into reputable scientists with backgrounds in studying neurodivergence at large and autism specifically. And what we know is that autism has always existed, but what has happened in more recent years is that the manual, the actual diagnostic manual that governs how doctors diagnose people has changed. So I'll use my husband as an example because I am convinced he is on the spectrum. And though he is very high functioning, there are just many qualities he has that I think ding, 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 right down the line, that I think a physician would flag. But under the old diagnostic manual, Michael never would have been diagnosed autistic. I don't even think he would have been diagnosed as having Asperger's because he's so high functioning. He's super social, he gets his work done, whatever. What many people would call a productive member of society. Well, the diagnostic criteria has changed so much that we have a lot of children, like my husband, who now have a full blown autism diagnosis. They never would have been part of this population before. So when we're talking about the incidence, that is a big contributing factor. But regardless, I'm happy that autism is in the spotlight. I'm thrilled about it. I'm glad everyone's talking about it. I just wish the tone was a little different in some cases.
As we talked about in case file number 102, understanding autism, there are words that we use. So I always like to not think of it, and it isn't a disease, it's a difference in brain type. It's just in that DSM, that diagnostic manual you reference, it's considered labeled more in that disorder disease place. And I think that's why a lot of times when a young person or even an adult get diagnosed, if it happens to be a child, their parent thinks it's maybe a negative thing. It's not. When we can really understand that the brain and all of our brains live on a spectrum. So whether you're neurotypical or neurodiverse, there are differences on both sides of that spectrum. So I hope the additional attention to autism spectrum, to neurodiversity, whatever you're going to call it, means that more people will come to understanding, because there's a lot of judgment, Erin. And how does that affect this topic that we're getting into today, the lateral violence? How does judgment play into that?
It's the key part of it. It's at the crux of it, because I'll just use autism parents as an example. So you could have 10 of us in a room, and every single parent would express a radically different experience in parenting their autistic child. If I'm talking about our son, Michael Francis, as an example, he's diagnosed level 2. So the levels are 1, 2, 3. So if you're level 1, you're, really high functioning in, mainstream school. Probably a lot of people would never suspect that you are diagnosed with autism. If you're level 2, like Michael Francis, I have a lot of people say to me, but he's so cute. I would never know there was anything wrong with him.
Wow.
Okay.
And that's judgment right there with a friendly
Yes,
smile.
that stings a little bit. But he can't sit still. He's always in motion. He always has a fidget spinner going. He's almost always making some sort of noise. He has a lot of sensory sensitivities, so that's sort of like his type, his autism type. That's what it looks like. And then you have people who are level 3 who are really profoundly affected, and some will certainly never be able to be mainstreamed in school. They will never hold jobs. They will never live independently. Some of them are, as we have heard our Health and Human Services Secretary say over and over and over again, they will not be able to go to the bathroom by themselves. I mean, it is a devastating condition. So you have that to begin with. The spectrum is so big now that we're talking about radically different experiences. So I did a social media post recently where I prefaced it by saying unpopular opinion. And then I went on to write, autism is not a superpower. It is a disability. Because what we're experiencing with Michael Francis right now is, I think, in my mother opinion, not my medical opinion, of course, since I am not a doctor, but we're seeing a lot of the mental health issues that often come along with autism, and that is these violent mood swings. I mean, he'll go from just being in an absolute rage and having a meltdown to laughing hysterically. He's destroying property, then he's playing with his sister, and it upends your whole world. I mean, it takes over your whole world, and nothing about it is pleasant. So when I come out and say stuff like that, many parents of high functioning autistic kids get mad because that's not their lived experience. So they're saying, like, oh, yeah, well, my kid is an honors student and in show choir and listing off all of their things. And I'm like, I'm happy for you. That is not my life. And it probably will never be.
Even though Michael Francis is a very smart young boy.
Yes.
It has nothing to do with how smart he is. It's other things about his brain and how it formed before he was born, since he was born, that give him the attributes to be diagnosed level 2. And you as
exactly.
a family have tried to learn. You're such a great example of not only learning yourselves for yourselves, but you share it on your Instagram, you share it in talks that you do in other writings, and not everyone's going to do that. So my guess is you probably get judged because you're an advocate also. So it's like you kind of have to not care about the judgment, it sounds like.
For sure. And, from being in media for many, many years, you develop a thick skin, certainly. I have probably gotten my feelings hurt more in this space and doing this advocating than I have for anything related to what I've done or said or looked like on TV because, it's personal. It's more personal. But yes, there is a lot of criticism. Many people who are high functioning and are able to advocate for themselves really have this attitude toward autism parents in general, but I would say moms really specifically, like, shut up and go away. They don't think we should be talking about this at all or sharing our experience at all. But the problem with that is there is no one telling our story. There is no one advocating for our kids if we aren't doing it because they can't do it for themselves.
A lot of them can't. You've also talked about gatekeeping and tone policing. What are those terms, Erin?
Okay, so the gatekeeping is like, oh, I have this knowledge and I'm hoarding it and I'm keeping it to myself. And the tone policing, which happens a lot on social media, everyone has experienced this, whether they realize it or not, is people saying, well, the way in which you're saying that is wrong. Your tone is offensive, and people are essentially telling you what your opinion should be and how you should express it. And I will freely admit that with some of my Instagram posts, people will come in being critical. And when I look back at the content I produced, I think, I could have done that better. Certainly if I could do it over again, I would. But another thing that I'm a firm believer in is never deleting. So
that's a really good point in
posts,
general, on no matter what the topic is.
yes, because I believe I have to own it. So even if it goes colossally wrong and people hate my guts and come after me in the comments, I feel like, well, I made that. I put that out there. I have to sit with that and own it. And so I had a post last spring around Easter that I put up that went viral. And, a PR person would say for all the wrong reasons, it did not go over well. And that is one of those that if I could, I won't say if I could take it back because I could delete the post, but I'm not going to. But I learned from that post. I definitely learned from that post.
Well, I love, even after all of these decades yourself as a journalist and being very much a public person in your community and in other spaces, that you're still learning and you're admitting that you're learning and you're admitting that you're not perfect on social media. Nobody is. It's such an amazing tool, but it also can be a force for destruction. And when someone is part of a group that is either marginalized or less understood, that might be another way to put it. One of the things that I'm a big advocate of is no matter what, if there is any inkling or any sense that a child is on the spectrum, get a diagnosis, because the younger a child is diagnosed, the more you can get the healthier, that's the word I'll use, coping strategies. Because it's also true that if you're on the spectrum, your probability of being addicted to a substance just to cope is astronomically higher than if you are neurotypical. So getting the diagnosis is important. Hopefully having friends and family, especially parents who are right there with you, that can make all the difference.
It's huge. We hear that phrase early intervention all the time. And even some people now are offended by that. When medical professionals will say early intervention, because then the clapback is, well, I don't need to be changed. My child doesn't need to be changed. So we don't need interventions. But I would argue, look, if you have a child who cannot speak, if you have a child who cannot hold a pencil or upright scissors, if you have a child who is in such emotional and psychological distress that they are hurting themselves or others, you need interventions. Okay.
And it's
At
not
that
about
point,
changing who your child is, it's perhaps
no.
giving them tools to live a calmer, healthier, more wellness focused life.
Yes, exactly. And so from the moment Michael Francis was diagnosed, as soon as we were able, we were accessing things like speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, ABA therapy. I've explored doing things like music therapy, equine therapy, let's just keep, throwing things at this and see what happens. I will say another thing that I'm seeing in the autism space, though, particularly on social media, that is scary to me is, people purporting to have these treatments or cures, like they're peddling gummies or, come to my clinic and I've got this, shockwave therapy thingamajigger and, it will cure your child's autism. There's just a lot of danger, I think, in people being manipulated, exploited, possibly actually physically hurt by some of the things that are out there. So, I mean, many people have cautionary tales on that front.
Well, and that just goes to the very definition in the first place. Autism is actually not a disease. It's a difference in brain. And whether you call that a disorder or a disability, it's a difference in brain from those of us who are neurotypical. So the people that are the majority, the neurotypicals, get to define these things. But you can't cure something that isn't a disease. If it's the way you were born, if you're born with 6 toes, yes, you could remove one of the toes, but I don't know that we call that a disease. You were differently formed, right? I mean, I'm just picking that because it's so ludicrous, but there might be someone out there who has 6 toes. They certainly don't have a disease. They're still a human being. They were just formed differently in the womb for whatever those reasons might be. Well, I'll go back to where we started, Erin. What is your advice? And I know you're not a doctor, but you are an advocate mom. You really are. And there are a lot of science theories swirling. There are a lot of narratives. There's a lot of political infighting over this. What is your advice for those of us who aren't as steeped in this content as you are to keep calm and to be part of the solution?
Oh gosh. Well, I think first and foremost, it's pretty likely that you do know someone whose life is affected by autism, certainly by disability, by broader definition. So I would encourage people to have open hearts and minds and to be willing to be uncomfortable. Because when I think of what I refer to as my former self, my blissfully unaware former self, uh, these things made me uncomfortable, right? I was even uncomfortable using the word disabled. It's like, oh, we want to use euphemisms like special needs or differently abled, these sorts of things, because saying the word disabled makes us feel bad. But I want people to lean into that discomfort, ask questions, be willing to be around my kid, even if, you're like, oh boy, like
Even if
what's
you don't
going on here?
understand, but being
Yes,
around can
because
reap some understanding.
absolutely. And so that is my big push. And that is why, even after being baptized by fire last spring on the one post that I was referencing, I'm still here. I'm still posting and I'm still sharing because I feel that strongly about it. I think it is that important. And so it's twofold. It's that I want other families living an existence that maybe looks kind of like ours to feel less alone. I want to be a loud voice to get the services, resources, supports, all of these things that our kids need to reach their full potential. And then finally, and maybe most importantly, I don't know, I do want people who have never had any of these experiences and know nothing about this life to see it and understand it, and then maybe hopefully become part of our community that is advocating for change.
Well, and you can do a lot of that if you just follow Erin on Instagram at Erin Kiernan 13. There's so much compelling content on there. It's many teachable moments. It's also your own personal story with your husband, with your daughter, with Michael Francis, which are really touching. And it just shows an autism family is another family. It's your neighbor. It's someone you work with. There's nothing freakish about it, right? It's just a difference. And I'm so glad that you're back to take us to the next level on this topic, Erin. I really appreciate it.
Always happy to do so. Get a hold of me anytime.
We will. And she mentioned the Autism Out Loud on Instagram. I'm following that now. Some really great inspirational posts on there too that have a little different editorial tone from Erin. So I kind of feel like I'm finding my balance in following a few different that give me more information on this topic. Today's case file is powered by Northwing Digital. Northwing Digital is driven by a simple mission: help businesses succeed. Guided by core values, trust through transparency, and GSD, get stuff done. Northwing specializes in SEO and paid digital ads that deliver measurable results. From Google search to paid social, strategies that help your business stand out and grow. Make your marketing dollars work harder. Visit northwingdigital.com to get started. Northwing Digital, your partner in growth. Rate, review, and subscribe to The Crisis Files on your platform of choice. Follow us on YouTube and Instagram at The Crisis Files. Visit thecrisisfiles.com for all 4 seasons of the show. I'm Roshini Rajkumar. Join me next time on The Crisis Files.